looking at you kids.
I wish I knew how to quit you.
This seems so fun.
There's no place like home.
I'm gonna make him an offer down with you.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Gone with the Wind. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're on the home stretch to the Oscars. We're probably going to have a bonus episode on Saturday at some stage with our final Oscar predictions. But we do have some goals and stuff to talk about for today. And we've got Dan here. Dan, how's it going?
I'm doing great. We've been putting this off to Mondays sometimes, Malcolm, because a lot of stuff has been happening over the weekend. And once again, we have one of those weekends where a lot of stuff happens. And we got a special guest here. I brought in somebody from my state in a different city. So introduce our special guest.
And also here we've got Lewis. He doesn't matter mind which pronunciation, but introduce yourself and let people know who you are.
Well, I have a Substack newsletter, the Mendes Movie Report at Substack.com. I do a lot of movie reviews there. I also kind of look back at the history of film sometimes, but I do follow the Oscar race. I've been following the Oscar race ever since I was a fourth grader watching the big Titanic sweep. So I've just always been very interested in seeing how the Oscar season goes, and it's one of my favorite things. I follow it as intently as I do sports.
There you go.
But yeah, this is going to be an interesting episode because we've got a few guilds that kind of announced their winners. And we're going to start off with the Costume Designers Guild. Because they had their awards last week, and they awarded excellence in science fiction fantasy costumes to Everything Everywhere All at Once, excellent in contemporary costumes to Glass Onion, and excellent in period costumes to Elvis. But Dan, what are your thoughts about the way the Costume Designers Guild went?
Well, the fact that Elvis won in period, that's a good sign for Elvis going into the Oscars next Sunday. The fact that Everything Everywhere is kind of sneaking into some of these costume guild awards and some of these kind of below the line awards might give it a little bit of a boost come Sunday. But the fact of the matter is, it looks like Elvis has got this in the bag, and that's going to be a very telling sign, considering if some of these other things go Elvis's way. They say, oh, it's got costumes, it's got this, or it's got that, whether it's makeup or hair design or whatever. I'm just using that as an example. This is good news for Elvis.
But Lewis, what are your thoughts about Everything Everywhere, Glass Onion, and Elvis sort of winning prizes at the Costume Designers Guild?
Well, I agree that this is extremely good news for Elvis. It really is looking like that's going to be the movie to beat for costume design for the Oscar. I think it's gotten to the point where it's getting linked to that movie, where people, if they want to give any love to that movie, costume design is going to be one of the places they awarded. And again, I also agree about Everything Everyone. One of the reasons why it just looks like it is the almost unstoppable front runner, because it's not just winning at the major guilds, it's getting these small tech and craft wins at these smaller guilds. And it's not that necessarily means it's going to win, costume design at the Oscar now, but what it shows is that there's that passion and support among some crossover voters in that costume design guild. And it kind of reminds me of Birdman, a movie that BAFTA wasn't that wild about, but you saw all this support across the guilds for it. So I think this is great news for Elvis and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah. So the one thing I was going to bring up is I for most of these, I'm actually going to go to the Oscars, see what's actually nominated in these categories. But yeah, this is as you said, Elvis is definitely a sure shot, but also nominated in costume design is Everything Everywhere All at Once. So it's so this is interesting because with the way the costumes goes, like they were in separate categories for the Costume Designers Guild, but now that they're both in there, so it's going to be interesting to see sort of where the people that maybe didn't really voted one or the other for the separate sections of the things are going to sort of go when they're both in the same category. So it's definitely going to be interesting there. I mean, in my mind, like I'm still sort of leaning slightly towards Elvis a little bit, but I'm not going to be surprised if everything everywhere upset it as well. But moving on to the Cinema Audio Society, which I think this guild is specifically for sound mixing, but it's still combined to sound for the Oscars. But for motion picture live action, it went to Top Gun Maverick. For motion picture animated, it went to Del Toro's Pinocchio, and the motion picture doco went to Moon Age Daydream. But Luis, what are your thoughts about the winners for Cinema Audio Society?
Well, I think it only highlights that Top Gun is looking pretty good in sound, even though it is getting a really tough fight from All Quiet on the Western Front. But ever since I saw that movie, I just had this feeling that it's going to be our sound winner, and it's been winning these sound awards. It's got the link to editing. And by the way, I don't think there's some. I think there is something to Pinocchio's win because it just goes to show you how strong that movie is in sweeping the animated feature, where it's winning even smaller animated feature awards. So I think if anything, it tells us that Top Gun is still looking pretty good in sound, even though it is All Quiet is right on its heels, and that Pinocchio really is just unstoppable in animation.
Yeah, I mean, I think Top Gun Maverick is probably a bit surefire for best sound personally, because it's one of those ones like typically, and I didn't actually go back and look, but I know this has been a trend for a lot. War movies do tend to do really well in best sound, like it's either war movies or musical related movies, and Top Gun Maverick definitely fits the bill for war. So I do think it's probably pretty strong at the moment. But as I pointed out, like the Cinema Audio Society is specifically sound mixing. I don't know if there is a sound editing guild. But Dan, what are your thoughts about best sound?
Yeah, I have to reiterate what you guys said. This is great news for Top Gun Maverick, but you just in the back of your head, you got to keep an eye out for All Quiet on the Western Front because war movies are a big. They win this award a lot, but I think they're looking for places to give Top Gun Maverick. This ain't the BAFTAs. This is the Oscars. I think they're looking for places to give Top Gun Maverick awards, and this sound and editing are two places it could sneak in there and win those awards. And so I think this is a good sign for Top Gun Maverick. And I agree with Luis about Pinocchio. Another good win for Pinocchio in another guild that you don't think about, but that just bodes well for Pinocchio on Sunday.
But yeah, I did actually quickly look, and there is a sound editing guild that their awards did happen on February 26th. We may have talked about them. I'm not sure. But for outstanding achievement in sound editing for feature dialogue, ADO was Banshees. Sound editing for feature effects was Top Gun Maverick. I mean, I think Elvis got sound music editing. So
yeah, I do remember now, Malcolm, talking about that.
Yeah, so Top Gun Maverick even got an award at the sound editors. So I think for best sound, I think they're pretty good actually. But moving on, we've gone to the USC Scripters, which is the award for adapted feature film, and Woman Talking won this. And yeah, they only had the one sort of movie related one there, but yeah, Woman Talking took the USC Scripters. I think this is a safe bet that Woman Talking is probably going to get adapted screenplay at the Oscars. But Dan, what are your thoughts about the USC Scripters?
Yeah, I've been saying this all along that this is the place to reward Sarah Polley, and really, it's the only place. She's not going to win Best Picture. She's, MGM and some of these people are going to be involved with other things. I think MGM put out Women Talking. I can't remember, but this is Sarah Polley. This is where you reward Sarah Polley. This is where you reward the achievement for this movie, and I think it's weird how it went away from Women Talking for the longest time, and now it's back. It came back to it, And I'm good for my. I'm glad actually. I want to see Sarah Polley win this award, and I'm glad she won it here. And this is a good sign.
Yeah. And Louise, what are your thoughts about Women Talking when winning the USC Scripters?
Well, I mean, Scripture hasn't matched with Oscar in a few years. However, what Women Talking has on its side is that it also won Critics' Choice. Now, Critics' Choice is not, there's no crossover with Oscar voters, but we know that when you win Critics' Choice, Scripture, and another guild that Women Talking had a good day with, WGA, that really is a nice combo that almost all the time leads to you winning the Oscar. And I really feel like this movie's gaining some momentum to win that screenplay. I was reading in Variety that Clayton Davis was writing about how women, particularly female actresses, have been stepping up and wanting to support this movie, and the way to support it is in screenplay. And it does feel like it's getting the momentum at the right time, especially when it's going up against movies like All Quiet or Top Gun, other Best Picture nominees. But it is the most writerly. It is. I mean, it's got Women Talking on the title. And I mean, it was my personal favorite adapted screenplay of the year, so I'm happy watching it get this momentum. I don't want to say it's got it in the bag yet. I still think it's a little bit close with All Quiet, but it's really hard for war films to win screenplay awards, and that's why I think Women Talking still has the edge.
I think Living, you can't count out Living. That has been getting a lot of love. That screenwriter,
and it's got the acting nomination, which is a good thing to have.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason Women Talking is probably getting more steam is the fact that it has since been released sort of wide around the world now. I think that's definitely helping it a little bit because I think it came out January the 20th. So I think it's definitely one of those ones that I think, yeah, I think Women Talking is probably a safe bet that's probably going to win, just because, it's one of those ones. Like, I haven't seen All Quiet, but when I think of Top Gun Maverick, like, the script is probably not the first thing I think about for Top Gun Maverick personally. But yeah, and might as well, just because we're talking about it, I'm gonna use that to transition to the WGA. I'm just going to rearrange the way I had it on my end. But yeah, so WGA adapted was Women Talking again. Original screenplay was Everything Everywhere All at Once. Dan, what are your thoughts about Everything Everywhere's chance with the WGA?
That is, look, I've been saying it all along, Malcolm. You just want to keep checking off these boxes. And the fact that Everything Everywhere All at Once checked off another box at another guild and a big one, that's it. That's more power for it going into Sunday. And I don't know what more I could say about it. We've been talking about it ad nauseum for so many weeks and months now. But yeah, I mean, this movie is like a juggernaut right now.
But Luis, what are your thoughts about Everything Everywhere with original screenplay?
Well, I do think we need to mention that Banshees was not eligible here because the WGA is infamous for all their really strict rules about how to get involved in their awards. But I will say that one of the things that I've noticed is that when you look at all the big major groups, whenever Everything Everywhere wins Picture. Not necessarily at the smaller critic circles, because I think critics are more willing to split director and screenplay, but at the bigger groups, if Everything Everywhere wins Picture, they also give it screenplay. And don't get me wrong, I think Banshees is a tough contender. I would not be shocked if it pulls off a big screenplay win, even if Everything Everywhere is going to win Picture, like we're starting to think, like it's looking like it's going to. But I just think that this adds on to the fact that this movie is just they're going to want to award it as much as they can. This now makes it have pulled off all 4 of the major guilds. It's won PGA, DGA, SAG, WGA. First movie to do that since Argo. Now, to be fair, Birdman probably would have done that also, but was ineligible at WGA. But the point is that we are seeing a sweep of the guilds that not even La La Land pulled off. When you think of that movies that have been upset for Picture, La La Land didn't pull this off. Saving Private Ryan didn't pull this off. Brokeback Mountain didn't pull this off. So if anybody's looking to see where this movie's weakness is, it's kind of hard to see it right now because it's pulling off something that past Best Picture winners have pulled off.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned Banshees. I completely slipped my mind. Without Martin McDonagh in there, you don't know what exactly could have happened if Banshees was in there, Lewis. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Malcolm, sorry to cut you off there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think Banshees is is kind of the one that could upset everything all at once getting screenplay at least, because it wasn't eligible for WGA, which means that when the writers are voting at the Oscars, there may be a case of wasn't eligible for the WGA, but it's a really good screenplay. I'll vote for it here. And you get the similar thing, Malcolm. Well, how are we going to reward Martin McDonagh? Well, maybe we're not going to be able to reward him in director, in picture. Well, let's reward him here. We could reward 3 sets of directors or 3 sets of different groupings of people that will be in Best Picture, Women Talking, Banshees, and everything, by giving Martin McDonagh and Sarah Polley. That's a very good point there. Yeah, I mean, it's also one of those ones that, like, I think, can't remember what I was actually going to say, but anyway, sorry. No, it's not your fault. But I think I saw one of my friends online was saying that that there hasn't been Everything Everywhere All at Once hasn't, like, not including the 4 major guilds, but I think they're saying that Everything Everywhere is one at about 10 or 11 different guilds, and that's kind of makes it the movie that's won the most guilds since in ages, because I think Titanic won about 10 of the Guild Awards in that year's Oscar race. So technically, it's actually won 12 because it wasn't reported that as much as the other guilds. But the Music Supervisors Guild also had awards, and they awarded Everything Everywhere 2 prizes. So technically, it's now got what I believe would be a record guild haul. Yeah. Yeah. As well as I was like, I remember my friend saying something about that. And I think he was saying the previous record was 10, which was Titanic and a few others. I think Slumdog might have been around there as well. But yeah, but that's definitely proven that Everything Everywhere is probably going to have a really good night at the Oscars. But the sad thing is, it's also looking like Banshees, which I think everyone's going, oh, he's going to get a few awards. I think that's not going to do as well as people think now. But moving on to Ace Eddies, for edited feature drama, it went to Top Gun Maverick. For edited feature comedy, Everything Everywhere All at Once. For edited feature animation, went to Del Toro's Pinocchio. And edited feature for documentary went to Fire of Love. But Luis, what are your thoughts about the Ace Eddie winners?
Well, I mean, there's actually a lot to take in from the Ace Eddie winners. I mean, for one, again, more evidence that Pinocchio's just dominating for animation. Fire of Love really is having a tough back and forth battle with Navalny, and it getting a win here is really nice, especially after it came up short at, I believe, PGA and BAFTA to Navalny. But it did win DGA as well, Fire Love. So that just goes to show you how tight that race is. And from what I'm hearing from people who actually talk to voters, it is looking like documentaries coming down to those two movies, Fire Love and Navalny. Now, in terms of the feature films, drama and comedy, this editing race is really going to be fascinating because on one hand, Top Gun has history on its side. If you have a sound nomination, you are likely, if you have a sound and editing nomination, you have a good shot to win editing. However, Everything Everywhere has literally swept all over the place, including BAFTA, where they were not very nice to the movie, even won there. So on paper, I would not blame anyone if they were told me that they're going with Top Gun in the history, or if they're going with Everything Everywhere in the sweep. So that editing race is going to be very interesting. It's going to tell us a lot on Oscar night over what trend to keep is more important: the sound nomination, or if a movie pulls off the sweep.
Yeah, because I mean it's definitely interesting because both Everything Everywhere and Top Gun Maverick are both nominated in editing. And it's so, and I mean, just from the AC, it's looking like it's going to be between those two. I mean, for sure, because they're the only two that won something that's in the category. But yeah, it's in my head. I think Everything Everywhere is probably the more impressive editing, but also it's one of those ones like I do really like the way Top Gun is edited as well. But Dan, what are your thoughts about best film editing?
Yeah,
or the ACEs?
The ACEs. We've been waiting for the ACEs to really kind of proclaim a editing winner, and you think that with Top Gun winning here, that would be the front runner going into the Oscars. We've talked about how they had 800 hours of footage and they edited it down and the jet fighting sequences and all that kind of stuff. But now creeping into the picture is Everything Everywhere All at Once. And if you really think about that movie, one of the most impressive things about it is its editing. So you can't really count it out on Sunday. And now we probably have like a 2-horse race here in editing. And once again, we're talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once in the conversation for these awards. And I mean, I'm telling you right now, there's a potential this movie could win a lot of Oscars come Sunday.
Moving on to the last gold that presented some awards is the Cinematographer's Guild, and that went to Elvis, and it's one of those ones that, with no Top Gun nominated in the category for whatever reason, it just didn't hit for the Oscars. But it's looking like Elvis might be a good front runner for cinematography, and I think it's one of those ones like I don't know if it's happened before, but that could be like the first female that's won in cinematography for a while. I don't know. I haven't gone back through the track just to find out, but it's definitely looking good for Elvis for cinematography. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Elvis winning the Cinematographer's Guild?
Well, I have a question for you, Malcolm. It was All Quiet on the Western Front in there?
All Quiet is nominated.
Okay.
I'm going to look up the cinematographer's one, but yeah.
Yeah, because that's a surprise to me, because without Top Gun in there, you think, okay, everybody's kind of going towards the cinematography of All Quiet on the Western Front. But now that you're saying Elvis, and that I know Elvis is nominated in this category come Sunday, so now it kind of puts in some doubt. Is All Quiet the front runner because Elvis is in there? I mean, Elvis has got good cinematography, but I think there's other things about Elvis that you think about when you think about that movie, not the cinematography. But with the Cinematography Guild giving it an award, you might have to second think your decision on your ballot come Sunday.
Yeah. Looking at the nomination for Guild, All Quiet was not nominated, so I think All Quiet is definitely still potentially in the running there. But Louise, what are your thoughts about the Cinematographer's Guild?
Yeah, I was looking to see if maybe Top Gun could pull off a win here, even though it wasn't at the Oscar. And because if that did happen, that would tell me All Quiet's winning at Oscar. But Elvis won. And by the way, this is actually the very first time ever that a female cinematographer has won at the Cinematographer's Guild. If she won at Oscar, she would be the first ever female to win the cinematography award. And I think they really should push that narrative during the campaign to help them, because I remember Power the Dog was trying to go with that narrative last year when it was nominated for cinematography. But I think All Quiet is going to be, it really is coming down to All Quiet and Elvis. And the problem is that I can see a lot of support and respect for All Quiet cinematography. And as we know, that the British side of the Academy definitely loved it. But there's also a lot of passion for Elvis, and I can see them deciding to award it in the tech categories, like we saw with, say, Bohemian Rhapsody, when that year when they decided to go crazy, giving it a bunch of techs. And I can see them giving that same passion to Elvis. Now, I generally think Elvis is probably going to end up being more like maybe actor, makeup, costume, that kind of stuff. But I would not be surprised if it wins cinematography. I don't think I'm going to predict it for cinematography, but I do think it's right on the heels of All Quiet. And if this movie is as popular as we've been told it is with some Academy voters, I can see it beating All Quiet here, especially if that narrative about the first ever female cinematographer takes hold, because this happened in the middle of voting. And that's always good to get these nice headlines in the middle of voting.
But yeah, it's definitely one of those interesting ones. But I mean, we've got a bit of time on our hands, so might as well talk about the Independent Spirit Awards. That was also good. That, as I just bring them up, because I didn't plan on this in my thing, but and sure, one thing I'll start off, because I kind of saw a big article about this when I was searching for this. Apparently, the person who did the monologue at the Independent Spirit Awards really ruffled some feathers by with his quips about, like, no one asked you to make the movies you make, and no one watched them. But then, what are your thoughts about sort of the monologue? Did you watch the Independent Spirit Awards? But
I did watch it, but I missed the beginning of the show. All I remember is the guy that was hosting was trying to do a joke involving Cate Blanchett and Todd Field, and they both crawled under the table. They avoided the guy like the plague. So obviously this guy was not making a lot of friends as the host of the host of the Independent Spirit Awards. Other than that, I thought the show was pretty good, and I liked the speeches and a lot of the different awards that they gave out. But yeah, the hosts, they might not want to go with this guy again.
Yeah, but Louis, did you watch the Independent Spirit Awards, and what are your thoughts on the host?
Yeah, I did, and I did see the opening monologue, and it was not good because he was like making jokes about no one's seen these movies, and it's like, this is the Independent Spirit Awards. This is the one place these jokes are definitely not going to work out. He also went on this weird rant against Deadline, like he had some kind of personal beef against Deadline, and the room was just kind of like looking at each other like, so what's the point of this? I don't think he worked out as a host real well. Now, that being said, I did think it was a good show. Other than that, I like the fact that it was streaming. So once again, you didn't have to worry about people. Like SAG, you didn't have to worry about people getting played off, which was great to see. And I mean, look, I love Everything Everywhere, so it was nice to see it. That being said, there's no crossover necessarily here with Oscar voters. We have to remember that. This is basically the Film Twitter Awards because they can basically you can pay to be a part of the membership, but it just continues the streak of the momentum and the good news that this movie has been having, because it did break a record for most wins at Indie Spirits.
Yeah. So just to save me from saying it, like multiple different times. Like Everything Everywhere All at Once got Best Feature, Best Director, Best Lead Performance, Best Supporting Performance, because the Independent Spirit Awards did sort of merge the male and females into one category.
Yeah, they have a non-gender categories, which is not a lot of awards do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones like it's one of those ones where I think, as I said to you one other time when you were talking about the potential of making the Oscars non-gender, it's like there's definitely pros and cons to that. Like the pro is
Malcolm, I would say a young adult category under the age of 18 could be non-gender, boys and girls in that category. Obviously, you keep the supporting actor, those. I mean, you don't make those non-gender, but I'm saying a young adult category because you probably don't get enough young adult boys and a young adult girl to give out too. So you combine them, and I think that's a valid award to give out for the Oscars. That's
no, I know, but I mean, it's one of those ones like one of our other discussions. We did talk about potential of making the lead actor and supporting actors non-gender as well, but it's just one of those ones like it's interesting, but yeah. It also Everything Everywhere All at Once also got Best Breakthrough Performance for Stephanie Zhu, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing. But yeah, I think for all those awards, it's definitely well deserved. But Louise, what are your thoughts about Everything Everywhere winning all those categories?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I correctly predicted it over at Gold Derby for the Indie Spirits. I correctly predicted it to have the sweep that it pulled off. In fact, the only thing I got wrong was international film. Joyland pulled off a little bit of an upset there. But I'm not surprised because, again, this is kind of like the Film Twitter Awards, and we all know that Everything Everywhere has a lot of passion among cinephiles, a lot of passion among that film Twitter crowd. So, to me, if anything, it would have been weird if it didn't dominate like it did. That would have been weird to me.
Yeah, and Dan, what are your thoughts about Everything Everywhere pulling off a big sweep at the Indie Spirit Awards?
Yeah, I reiterate what Lewis is saying. I mean, if it didn't win a lot of categories, you'd be like, what the heck is going on here? And are we living in the wrong multiverse here? Is this the multiverse where Everything Everywhere isn't the most popular film of the year, But yeah, I mean, it was just like a train. Somebody would get up there and then the next person would get up there, and then the next person would get up there. They'd break it up by some award that was like some career achievement award or some specific other kind of award. And I was glad to see, I'm enjoying all these speeches. I'll be honest with you. I'm at the point now where I could just listen to Michelle Yeoh and Kiwi Kwan just get up there and wax poetic about whatever. And Brendan Fraser, these guys have just been doing it all year long. And it's just becoming enjoyable just to get these guys to hear these guys all tell their stories,
Yeah. But moving on to some of the other categories that were not won by Everything Everywhere All at Once. Best cinematography went to Tar. And which, I mean, looking at the nominees like Marina, After Pearl, and Neptune Joss, like I'm not overly surprised. Like I do think the cinematography of Tar was pretty good. I don't think this one means it's going to be a contention for Elvis at the Oscars because that was also nominated at the Oscars. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Tar winning Best Cinematography?
Yeah, I agree with you. There's no correlation here with Tar winning at the Indie Spirits and winning the Oscar because it's not going to happen. If that happened, I think everybody would be very surprised. Those two first sequences, and I've said it before, those are the reasons to see Tar. Those are the reasons to see the direction, the cinematography, the acting by Cate Blanchett. Those two segments are the main reason to see this film. They are just beautifully shot and acted and directed. But real quick, Malcolm, I wanted to just say something about, I forgot to say this a few minutes ago when we were talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. There was a story that the Daniels were talking about how 3 or 4 years ago, they were in the back of the room, it's a giant tent on the beach, in Santa Monica, I believe, and they were at the back of the room for Swiss Army Man, and all these other movies were winning. And now, after all these years, they're up at front, and they're the ones accepting in there, and they showed a lot of appreciation for the Indie Spirit Awards and the whole how they had to work their way up. And there was a really 2 segments involving Chloe Zhao and Sean Heder, the last 2 winners, really the big winners. Well, with Coda and Nomadland, and they showed a lot of love for the Daniels and how everybody, that's the kind of stuff I want to see at award shows. Showing people, okay, we saw that you were in the back of the room for a movie 5-6 years ago, whatever, and now you're at the front of the room, and congratulations, you worked hard, you made something, you did something good, and you could see how the love in the room really spread around with certain groups of people that really talked about those guys, and how it's just kind of biding your time in the industry and working hard, and something good will happen. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. I meant to say it a few minutes ago, Malcolm.
But Luis, what was your thoughts about Tar winning Best Cinematography?
I think a big part of that was just that, again, Tar is also super popular with that group, but obviously they were going to go crazy for Everything Everywhere. So I think this was just the best place for them to award it something. And I mean, to be honest, when you look at the competition was going up against, it's not that we're talking about these movies having bad cinematography. It's just that we're not talking about the heavyweight hitters that this movie's going up against at the Oscar. I just think this was merely them saying, okay, we're going to give Everything Everywhere all of this, but this is our only shot here to at least say, hey, we also love Tar.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones where I was looking at the nominations. I'm slightly surprised it wasn't Aftersun that got that love, because I've heard a lot of people say how much they love Aftersun, but so it's just going to show maybe it's not that sort of popular that we think. But best documentary featuring To All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. But Dan, what are your thoughts about All the Beauty and the Bloodshed getting documentary at the Indies?
Yeah, this is. I mean, I know this is not a lot of correlation, but I'll tell you, any award that All the Beauty and the Bloodshed can collect is going to help it come Sunday, because I believe it's the best documentary of the year, and I think because of the topic that's in it, I love what's the volcano one? I love
Fire of Love.
Fire of Love. I freaking love that. I love Navalny, but I think the best documentary of the year is All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, and especially for this country that we live in here, me and Lewis lives in, Malcolm, there's a real epidemic of opioids and addiction in this country, and for this woman to just shed light on that and her own past, and then point the finger at these people, I think that's something that's important in our country. Even though I love Navalny, and that was all in real time, that documentary was being filmed in real time. That's a great documentary. This is a good thing. I'm glad this movie got rewarded here.
And Louise, what are your thoughts about All the Beauty and the Bloodshed getting documentary?
Well, I mean, if it were up to me, it would win the Oscar, because out of the Oscar nominees, it's my favorite of the documentaries. But I think it's going to have a tough time, because it is when you compare it to something like Navalny or Fire of Love, I feel like it's less accessible to like some casuals, because it's a very raw documentary. I mean, at one point you're watching her self art, where she's taking pictures of her, in nude, in sexual activity and stuff like that. It's a very raw documentary, and I think it's not going to be like it's not a crowd pleaser like Fire and Love necessarily. I mean, it doesn't have a depressing ending necessarily, but it's not like Fire and Love. Fire and Love makes people feel like happier, I think, and I think that like Navalny has kind of that thriller aspect. It's very timely, but I think this movie has a tough go at it to win the Oscar. So, but I'm not surprised that it won here, because this is the exact kind of crowd that is passionate about this documentary. And I agree with Dan that if this movie's going to try to pull off the big win at Oscar, it's going to need every exposure that it needs. And I thought that they had a great speech and moment up at the stage as well.
But best international film went to Joyland from which is a Pakistani movie. But Luis, what are your thoughts about Joyland winning international?
Yeah, I was surprised because I was predicting Saint Omer because I felt like that was the kind of foreign film that would really strike with this kind of crowd. But I did have Joyland at number 2 over at Gold Derby because this is a movie that I've been noticing has been picking up steam and momentum. A little too late for it to get any Oscar love, but it's been picking up momentum from a lot of people. I personally have not seen the movie, but I know that it's been gaining a lot of traction and momentum among this crowd. So while I am surprised, I'm not shocked that it pulled off the win here.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I'm not a big foreign film guy. But Dan, what are your thoughts about Joyland winning international film?
Yeah, I'm the same boat as Lewis here. I haven't seen it, and I was surprised because I thought Saint Omar would win this. I mean, Saint Omar is an amazing documentary. I mean, foreign film. I said I don't know why I always get Saint Omar mixed up with documentary for some reason, Lewis.
I mean, it kind of plays that way in a way because of the way it's shot.
Yeah, and I always mix that up in my head. But no, I thought Saint Omar was going to win here, and it was a surprise to me. It just tells you that there just wasn't that much love all around this award season for Saint Omar. And I guess the people like Lewis and I who saw it, we liked it, but the people that mattered that needed to vote on this thing, it didn't do as good as we all thought it was gonna.
Yeah, and but the last one here, last two, best first screenplay went to John Patton Ford for Emily the Criminal. Once again, I kind of missed this when it was originally out. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
On Netflix, Malcolm. You might be able to see. I don't know if it's on your Netflix or not, but
it's not on Netflix for me, but it's on a different streaming service for me. I just haven't got around. I haven't got around to actually seeing it.
I got.
But Dan, what are your thoughts about Emily the Criminal?
Well, I mean, I like Emily the Criminal. I have friends in my guild that weren't a fan of this movie, and I'm actually I like Aubrey Plaza, and you know she's been in White Lotus and stuff like that, and she's also in another show, a movie I just saw called Operation Fortune. She's really doing a lot of different things, and I'm a big fan of her in that movie. And I think what I like about the script is, look, there's a lot of people that are struggling in the world, Malcolm, and sometimes people resort to things that they shouldn't be resorting to because you're trying to survive. And I can relate to that movie, and I can relate to the script, and I was glad to see that one because of personal reasons of struggles in my own life and strife in my own life, you know.
But Louise, what are your thoughts about Emily the Criminal winning best first screenplay?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Emily the Criminal won because I've been noticing that I feel like just like Joyland, it feels like it's a late discovery for between this kind of the more cinephile groups. Even though this movie came out, I think came out at Sundance last year, and then it came out later in the year. But I saw someone make the point, and I think I agree with them. I think it showing up at Netflix during voting time may have been really, really helpful because it helped it kind of feel like this brand new thing, and it allowed it to have the momentum to win. Now, I wouldn't say I love the movie, but I did like it for the most part. And I've been hearing a lot of excitement around it, and I would not be surprised if this we're going to hear more from this director.
Writer, right? Wasn't it writer? Yeah.
Well, writer, and I believe he also directed it.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
But yeah, and then best first feature went to After Sun, which is kind of a no-brainer to be honest. But Louise, what are your thoughts about After Sun getting best first feature?
I mean, it just feels like the one that's been winning all these first features all over the place. I mean, I'm not on the bandwagon with After Sun, but I don't think it's a bad movie either. But it's got a very passionate crowd behind it. So I just don't think anything was going to beat this in this category.
But yeah, that is the end of this episode of Gone for the Win today. It's only a short one, but we only had a few things to talk about. But we will be back on Saturday with a Oscar special where we're going to talk about our predictions for all the categories and where we think it's going to go. I'm going to try and lock down some special guests for it. We'll see what we can do. But yeah, that being said, that's the end of the Gone for the Win for today. But Dan, where can people find you online?
Yeah, I would have agreed with Lewis on After Sun at the winning this first feature as well. Charlotte Wells has been winning everywhere at the BAFTAs and everywhere else. I think she still has some work to do as far as the filmmaker goes. There was some emotional things in After Sun that I kind of tied on to, but there's some problems with the film, and I understand why you're not totally on board with it, Lewis. But you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Letterboxd, or From the Fourth Row, or DP Skip Allen on those places. I'm kind of mixed up when it comes to all that stuff, but I'm a film critic here in Orlando, Florida, and I write for FromTheFourthRow.com and DisappointmentMedia.com. Also, I've been on Picture This for 2 episodes. We did 1972 and 1974, and I'll be doing 1990, which are all the Godfather years. So look forward to that. And I can't wait for Saturday night where we get to make our predictions for the final predictions. Malcolm's going to hold me to my predictions on Saturday night for my Oscar predictions. So everybody else, you can hold me to my predictions as well. Gone with the Wind Saturday night. It's going to be fun. And
Luis, where can we find you online?
MendesMovieReport.substack.com. 100% free. You don't have to pay anything. I'm not doing one of the paid subscription things. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Letterboxd at Mendes Movie RPT. I'm currently going through all the years in movies. I'm up to 1939, so if anybody wants to check that out, I'm making a list on Letterboxd and such. Also, you can find my personal Oscar projections. I also write about that as on top of my movie reviews.
You can find me in Tape Free Productions, where I host Rankum every Sunday night. Well, yes, I know the Oscars are Sunday night, but we're going to Rankum's still going to happen. It's going to be a little bit earlier than usual. And we're going to be doing a Rocky Creed franchise rankings, which is like all late movies, but we're also including the director's cut of Rocky 4 and Creed 3, making it 10. Yeah, it's one of those. But yeah, you can also find me hosting trivia matches on Full Metal and basically wherever there's trivia tournaments, anything happening, I'm usually around everywhere. But with that being said, that's the end. And now I'm going to get some bacon and eggs.
Just give me all the bacon and eggs you have.